Hey there, it's Mr. Stu. In today's lesson, we're going to learn about effective discipline. We're going to learn how to take a position of empathy while you're disciplining your child. We're also going to learn some characteristics of effective discipline. We'll talk about the hot button issue of spanking, and I'll also go over 3 rewards and 5 punishments that you're probably not using, but you definitely should. Then stay tuned at the end of this video to learn how to give and practice giving effective praise for your child. And as an activity for yourself, learn how to give yourself effective praise. Let's check it out. Today we're going to be talking about replacing abusive and ineffective discipline. To start off, I want to talk about what a position of empathy looks like when you are disciplining a child. Because really, we never want to step into a situation where we're disciplining out of anger or out of embarrassment, anything like that. We want to make sure that we are doing our best to understand this child. So let's talk just for a minute about what a position of empathy looks like in discipline. Dr. Stephen Bavelek from Family Development Resources has an excellent quote all about this. He says this: "I believe all children should be able to expect that adults will treat them as valued human beings, worthy of compassion, understanding, and trust." Let me say that again. I believe all children should be able to expect that adults will treat them as valued human beings, worthy of compassion, understanding, and trust. He goes on to say this: parents will accept nothing less from their children, and children should expect nothing less of their parents. Can we believe that children are valued human beings worthy of compassion, understanding, and trust? Valued human being. Do we believe that children have intrinsic value just because they are alive? Just because a child is born, just because they have life, they have intrinsic worth. Can we start off our understanding of discipline by believing that that child has intrinsic worth? Are we approaching the situation in a way that is giving the most compassion that we possibly can? In the social work field, we use a term, it's called the least restrictive alternative or the least restrictive environment. What that means is I'm not going to take a child who argues with their parents and put them into a hospital setting. I'm not going to hospitalize them for that behavior. I'm going to use the least restrictive environment I can to teach a child. The same is true in discipline. Are you willing to take the least restrictive, most compassionate alternative? Or do you go straight to spanking, straight to timeout as your first use of discipline? We'll learn how to do that. Do we give understanding to our children? Are we willing to understand the behavior even when we don't agree with the behavior? We talked about this just a little bit in the last lesson, but can we see a behavior that a child is exhibiting and say, you know what, that's not appropriate, but I do understand where that comes from? Or are we constantly looking at our child and saying, you know better, you should know better? Maybe they do know better, maybe they should know better, but do they know how to do better? That's what we're going to talk about today. Can we give that understanding of the behavior even when we don't agree? And finally, can we trust that our child is doing the best that they possibly know how to do? In the same way that we need to understand the behavior, we need to try to understand the motives for behavior, we need to just trust that that child is doing the best that they know how to do, and if they knew how to do better, they would be doing better. So yes, there are mistakes, and yes, there are things that will make us want to rip our hair out as we're raising children, but can we believe and can we give trust to a child that they really are doing the best they know how to do? That maybe in another situation with a different person, they would react differently. But right now, in this moment, that's the best they've got for us. When they throw the spaghetti up against the wall, maybe they were able to talk about their anger earlier. Maybe they'll be able to talk about their anger better tomorrow. But right now, in that moment, can we believe, can we give trust that that child is doing the best that they know how to do? I believe that all children should be seen as valued human beings, worthy of compassion, understanding, and trust. And if we can come at it from that perspective, from that position of empathy, then we're ready to talk about discipline. Now let's talk just real quick about the difference between discipline and punishment, because discipline and punishment are not the same thing. Punishment is a form of discipline, but discipline is this overarching concept, and punishment is one of the things that we can use to discipline our child. Punishment is either the adding to of something negative or taking away of something positive. That's what a punishment is. Now, discipline does much more than just add something negative or take away something positive. Discipline is the way that we teach our children right from wrong. It's also the way we teach our children what to expect and what not to expect, that the world is not fair. Don't expect it. And it also teaches children what to do and what not to do. So many times as parents, we focus on what not to do, and we forget that we also need to train children in what to do. Let's talk just a little bit about discipline styles as it pertains to attachment styles. So we were able to talk about secure attachment, anxious avoidant attachment, anxious attachment, and avoidant attachment. Well, there's also some discipline styles. The first type of discipline style that we have is the uninvolved parent. It's the parent that I like to call the Batman parent. Why? Because Bruce Wayne's parents were murdered. So for whatever reason, maybe you're working with a child who has some uninvolved parents. Or maybe you are that uninvolved parent, and right now you're noticing that maybe you're not consistent, maybe you're not appropriate. If that's you, these are the parents that just let their child roam free. They're the parents that don't really check in on their child. Usually they are completely uninvolved whatsoever. They may have been removed as a guardian of the child, but these parents are uninvolved. If you are an uninvolved parent and you are here today, I want you to know it's okay. We can get you to that secure attachment. We can move you along. The other side, though, is that Batman children grow up to be Batman parents. So maybe right now, as you're listening to me talk, you are understanding that your parent was uninvolved. That your parent was one that just let whatever happen. They didn't have talks with you about what's right and wrong. They didn't have talks with you about what to expect, what not to expect. They didn't help you learn what not to do and what to do. And so now you're standing here with a Batman mask on trying to have secure attachment with your child, and you don't know quite how to do that. If that's you, I want you to know it's not too late. We can help you form that secure attachment with your child. So those anxious and avoidant attachment styles typically lead to, like I said, what we call uninvolved parenting. Then we have the anxious parents. The ones that are all about earning the love. The ones that are all about, I will be proud of you if you do this thing or act this way, and you are going to be a huge disappointment to me if you do not do this thing or act this way. These are the parents that are the controlling parents. These are the parents that are really upset that their children are playing video games all day long and not having conversation with them, but they play their child like their child is their video game. They're the ones who are walking around constantly checking on the child, constantly belittling the child, constantly pointing out things that child could be doing differently, should be doing differently, judging that child's motives, judging that child's behaviors. These are what we call authoritarian parents. Authoritarian, it's like the controlling parent. And that typically leads to the anxious attachment style. There's another type. There's the avoidant attachment style. And typically that lands us in this territory over here. My parents called these parents hippies. They are the ones that are the permissive ones. Just, my child is my absolute best friend. Everything's okay, and my child can do absolutely no wrong. They typically have appropriate expectations of their children, but very low consistency with discipline. These parents are called the permissive parents. And finally, in secure attachment land, we have the authoritative parent. So many of you right now are looking at this and thinking, oh yeah, here we go. Spare the rod, spoil the child. He's going to tell us, he's going to be the first one ever to tell us it's okay for us to spank children. The authoritative style is the style that is based on a verse in the Bible that talks about a rod and sparing the rod and what that will do with your children. We'll talk about that in just a little bit. But the secure attachment style typically comes from an authoritative discipline style. That means that expectations are appropriate and discipline is consistent. Let's talk for just a minute about spanking. And spare the rod, spoil the child. The problem is that so many people quote that verse, and my background is in ministry. I was a full-time youth minister for 6 years. I've read the entire Bible multiple times, and spare the rod, spoil the child is nowhere in the Bible. It's based on a verse, it's Proverbs 13:24. And that verse says, "He who spareth the rod hateth his children, but he who loveth his children disciplines them sometimes." It doesn't say if you don't hit your children, you're a bad parent. And as a matter of fact, the rod that is talked about in that verse is a shepherd's staff. A shepherd's staff was used to gently push or gently pull. It would typically have a hook on the end, or gently pull the sheep in the direction that they wanted the sheep to go. That's what the biblical context of that verse is. It's not saying if you don't hit your child's going to grow up to be a drug addict. What that verse is saying is that you need to guide your child. You need to gently push and gently pull them in the way that they are supposed to go. But let's talk just a little bit about spanking while we're here. Because there are some characteristics of effective discipline. There's 3 different characteristics. Number 1 is that it's timed as soon as possible after the behavior. If you've seen something positive and you want that thing to continue, you need to praise or reward as soon after that behavior as you possibly can. If you see a negative behavior that you want to stop, you need to punish or ignore that behavior as soon as possible after that behavior happens. The second characteristic of effective discipline is that it is related back to the thing that happened. What that means is that if a child draws on the wall, we don't take away their tablet, because how does the tablet have anything to do with art supplies or the wall? It needs to be related to the behavior in question. The final characteristic of effective discipline is that it teaches what not to do and what to do. It's not just a don't do this, don't do that, stay away from that, stay away from that. It's not just that, it's what not to do and what to do. So now let's talk about spanking. Can spanking be effective? Number 1, is it timed soon after the behavior? I'm not sure about you, but I was never spanked right there immediately as soon as something happened. My parents would always have to take me to another room, take me to a bathroom. My mom would say, wait until your dad gets home. All sorts of things like that. Is it timed soon after the behavior? If not, spanking cannot be an effective discipline strategy. Second, is it related to the behavior in question? If your child draws on the wall and you spank them, what does a spank have anything to do with crayons, a wall, or any sort of restitution for that behavior? It's completely unrelated. So when you ask a child, why did you get spanked? If they can't answer that question, then it's ineffective because it's not related to the behavior that got them spanked. And third, it teaches what to do and what not to do. Does a spank do that? Or does a spank just say, you were bad for doing this? It doesn't teach a child what to do. It only teaches a child what is wrong to do. And if all we do is teach a child what is wrong to do, then maybe they should know better, but they won't know how to do better. So can spanking be effective? I'm not so sure, because very rarely is it timed soon after the behavior. It's almost never tied to the behavior in question. And it only teaches what not to do. It doesn't teach a child what they should do or what they could do instead. Let me give one final note on spanking. The laws surrounding spanking are very ambiguous. And as a social worker, and maybe as a teacher or as a parent, just so you know, you are what's called a mandated reporter. That means if any abuse happens under your watch, you have to report that thing. So let me be very clear. As a social worker, if your child has a mark, I will report it. If your child says something to me that makes me concerned, I will report it. If your child starts acting differently, I will report it. And the laws surrounding spanking are so ambiguous that the investigator who shows up from CPS to your house is going to be the individual who gets to decide whether or not you were abusive to your child. Do you want to take that risk? So not only is spanking ineffective, it's not worth it because you are not teaching your child anything. You're only showing them what not to do. It's not timed soon after the behavior. It's not related to the behavior. And it doesn't show them what they should be doing. It only teaches them what they should not be doing. And it's not the rod of discipline that so many of us have claimed to be using. So if we're not going to use spanking, what are some things that we can use? I'm going to give you 3 rewards and 5 punishments that maybe you're not using, but you should be because they're very effective and free. Rewards. There's 3 different rewards that we talk about. I help to train service animals for different people. And as I was learning about training dogs, the trainer told me something that I will always remember. He said, when you are rewarding a dog, there's 3 different ways that you can reward the dog: talking, touching, and treating. Well, what I've come to find is that that's pretty true across all animals. People are animals, and yes, we are higher intelligent animals, but we are animals. So if we are touching, talking, or treating our child, then we are doing some type of reward or discipline. Touching. There is some gentle, nurturing touch that can be great for your child. A hug, a side hug, a back rub, a fist bump, a high five if you are a teacher. The side hug is one of my absolute favorite things. But can you imagine that if your child did something appropriate or something positive and they consistently got nurturing touch, a hug, a high five, a fist bump, how much more would they want to do that thing just because it feels so good to get that positive touch? Touching in a nurturing and gentle way is such an effective reward for children. Talking, praise. Praise is known in research to be the most effective reward that we can possibly give children. There's 2 different types of praise. There's praise for being. That's just, you know what? There's something about you that is so incredible. You are creative. You are smart. You make me smile. Those are some praises for being. Then there's praise for doing. That means that they completed something, they did something that they should be proud of. Oh my goodness, you scored so many points in your game. Look at that picture that you drew for me. You got an A on your spelling test. You got a B on your spelling test. You got a C on your spelling test, but last time you got an F. That is so great. Thank you so much for that, buddy. You've done so well. Praise for being, praise for doing. That's some of the most effective reward that we can give children. And then treating, and by that I don't mean food. We don't need to just buy our children special chips, special snacks, special candy, special meals. It's not like that. But we can treat them with privileges, with tangibles. Maybe every once in a while they might get a toy. Young children love stickers. Have you ever just given your child a sticker to tell them that you were proud of them for something? You can give nurturing touch. You can praise your child. And you can give them those tangibles and privileges. Privileges are a treat. Maybe they get more time on their electronics. Maybe they get to stay up a little bit later. Maybe they get to do a special activity. Maybe they get to make slime, as all of your children want to do. maybe that's the reward. Can you give more nurturing touch? Can you give more praise? And can you work on finding some of those treats that your child will respond to? Those are 3 great rewards that maybe you're not using, but you can start using now. And remember, we want to keep those things appropriate and consistent. So every time the child does something appropriate, then we are consistently reinforcing that behavior. Now let's talk about punishments. There's 5 punishments that I think are very effective, that are not spanking, that I think can be used by parents raising all sorts of different types of children. The first is the loss of privileges. If you can give privileges, then you can take them away. Now let me explain. Food is not a privilege. Now a special meal might be a privilege, but food is not a privilege. Love is not a privilege. Family time is not a privilege. Those are needs that children have. So if it's family game night, it is not appropriate to take away family game night from a child who's behaving inappropriately. They probably need family game night more than anyone else. But let's say they were looking forward to a special treat, then they're not going to receive that. Or maybe they were wanting some extra time on their electronics, they're not going to receive that. A loss of privilege, those special things that you were going to give, you're not going to give. And here's just a statement that you can use if you're going to use loss of privileges. Because you didn't get off the Xbox when I told you, you are losing 30 minutes of your Xbox time. Next time, if you get off when I tell you to, you won't lose that time. Here's what that statement just did. That statement just let the child know the inappropriate behavior, it let them know the punishment for that behavior, and it let them know what to do next time. And that's how we use these punishments. It needs to have those 3 parts that we're going to say, here's what you did, here's the consequence, and here is what you can do next time. You can use the same thing with rewards. You can say, because you cleaned up your room so well, you are going to get a special treat. And if you keep doing that, I will continue just loving to praise you for it. The second punishment that works really well is being grounded. Now, being grounded doesn't mean that you lock your child in a cold, dark room. Being grounded means that you restrict them to where they can go. It can still mean that your child who is running around the house like crazy can still have some outside time. I see parents all the time ground their children, and it becomes more of a punishment for themselves than it does for the child. Because while you are trying to find something for your child to do indoors that is not electronics, they are tearing everything apart. So when you ground your child, understand that grounding is on you. So do you need to ground your child to the house? Do they need to be grounded to your house and the yard? Can they be grounded from a certain place? Maybe they went somewhere they weren't supposed to go, so they're grounded from there until you learn that you can trust them again. But again, we want to break it down into those 3 pieces. Here's the behavior you did. You went somewhere you weren't supposed to go. Because of that, you are not allowed to go to that place. When I can trust you again, you'll be allowed to go back there. It's the 3 pieces, and it's tied to the behavior. So if a child is staying on their Xbox, loss of privilege is a great punishment because it's tied to what they did. If a child is going places they shouldn't go, grounding is a great punishment because it's tied to the behavior that got them in the trouble. The third is a statement of disappointment. And the reason that I say statement is because so many times parents go into lectures of disappointment. A statement of disappointment is 1 sentence, maybe 2, that tells a child that you are disappointed in the choice that they made. Because you did this, I am disappointed, but I know you're going to do better in the future. A statement of disappointment will go way farther than a spanking ever would. Because a child hears what happened, it's tied to the behavior, it's immediately after the behavior, and it teaches them, here's what you did that you should not have done, here's the consequence, and here's what I know you can do next time. A statement of disappointment. Fourth is restitution. That's making good on what you did wrong. So if you draw on the wall, you're going to be cleaning that wall. If you steal, you're going to have to either take the item back or pay for it or both. but you're going to have to make good on what you did inappropriately. And again, we're going to break it down into those 3 phases. Because you drew on the wall, you will need to clean up the wall. Once you've cleaned up the wall, we'll talk about how you can use crayons in the future. We told them what they did. We told them the consequence, and we told them what they can do moving forward. Restitution. And the final is timeout. Now let's talk just one moment about timeout. Timeout is not a seclusion. It is not forever, and it's not first. It's not seclusion, it's not forever, and it's not first. If the first thing you do when your child does something is say, that's a timeout, then that's ineffective discipline. That's inappropriate expectations. A timeout is about the most extreme as we need to get. But a timeout is a removal from that certain situation for a certain period of time for a certain reason. It is a removal from a certain situation for a certain period of time for a certain reason. It is not to just send the child to their room. It's not so that you can have more alone time. A timeout is to be used because a child has done something typically to another person, and they need to take some time away from that person to think about what they did so that when they come back, they can have an appropriate interaction with that person. Do you see how that breaks down into the 3 phases? Here's what you did. You hit them. Because of that, you are receiving a timeout for this many minutes. When you come back, you will need to apologize. And after you apologize, we'll fix this relationship and we can move forward. What you did, the consequence, what to do in the future. So those are 3 rewards and 5 punishments that you can use with your children. And remember, every single time, here's the behavior that happened, here's the consequence, good or bad, and here's what you can either continue to do in the future or how you can do it differently in the future. The most important thing to remember, what you focus on is what you will get more of. If you are constantly this authoritarian parent that is looking to control your child, and you are constantly nagging on and pointing out all of the things that they should not be doing, it is not going to make them do those things less. It's going to make them do those things more because it's what you are focused on. It's the way they are getting their attention. If you are this permissive parent who is constantly just allowing your child to do whatever they want, and then you're focusing on it and making it funny when they do something that is inappropriate, you're going to see more of that. Why? Because you've chosen to focus on it. And if you are this uninvolved parent, then your child will go to bigger and bigger extremes to get you to focus on something. But if you will choose to lead and to guide your child, and when they do something right, you nudge them to keep doing that right thing. And when they do something wrong, you reach out and you gently pull them in, using those rewards and those punishments and keeping discipline appropriate and consistent, then you will be able to have a more secure attachment with your child. And by focusing on those things that you want the child to focus on, you'll show them what the difference is between right and wrong. You'll show them what to expect and what not to expect. And you'll show them what to do and what not to do. And that is what discipline is all about. Here's an activity that you can try with your child based on all of the things you just learned. We learned that praise is one of the most effective rewards that you can give your child. Why don't you allow them to choose an activity that they love to do and they're so proud of being able to do? While they do that activity, you sit with them and give them as many statements of praise as you possibly can. Remember to praise them for being just who they are and praise them for doing, for accomplishing the different things that are part of that task. Now, take some time for yourself and think about the praises that you deserve. What are some praises for being who you are that you deserve to tell yourself right now? And what are some praises for doing? What are some of those things that you do that you are so proud of yourself for being able to take care of? Write them down either in a journal or in your phone and look back on them. Don't forget to give yourself praise. I hope this lesson helps you and your child form more secure and more consistent attachment. Until next time, spread the word and share the love.